The metal walls of the underground facility hummed with alien technology as Dr. Kira Stone walked through the frozen corridors. Her breath made small clouds in the cold air as she followed the tall, scaled figure of Commander Veltar, the reptilian. Alien's yellow eyes gleamed with curiosity as they approached the ancient cryogenic chamber. "This human has been frozen for 300 years, Kira explained, checking her readings on the scanner. "The ice formation is perfect. His body should be completely preserved." Veltar clicked his tongue in amusement. "A relic from when your species still thought they could fight us. How amusing." "What was his role in your primitive military?" Kira read from the cracked nameplate on the chamber. "Colonel Jake Morrison, United States Marine Corps. Age 45 when frozen in 2157. During the final Earth defense, a Marine." Veltar hissed with laughter.
"Oh.
"One of your ancient ground soldiers.
Eh?
They used chemical weapons and metal bullets. Correct? How quaint. The Supreme Admiral will enjoy studying this museum piece." The chamber's systems began to activate with a low whir. Warming elements slowly raised the temperature while medical scanners checked the frozen man's vital signs. Kira watched the displays with professional interest, but her heart ached thinking about what this man would wake up to. Earth was gone as he knew it. Humans now worked in mines and factories across the galaxy, their freedom a distant memory. Steam rose from the chamber as ice melted away from the man inside. Jake Morrison was tall and broad-shouldered, with graying hair and weathered features that spoke of years in combat. Even in frozen sleep, his face held a hardness that came from seeing too much war. "His cellular structure is remarkable," Kira noted. "The freezing process worked perfectly. He should wake up with all his memories intact." "Good," Veltar said, adjusting his ceremonial armor. "Want him to understand how completely his species has fallen. Perhaps he can provide entertainment by telling us about their pathetic last stand." The chamber's lid hissed open, and warm air flowed over Jake's body. His chest began to rise and fall in shallow breaths. Color slowly returned to his skin as circulation resumed. After several minutes, his eyes fluttered open. Jake's first sensation was cold. The second was confusion. He tried to sit up, but his muscles felt weak and strange. A woman with kind eyes and brown hair was leaning over him, speaking softly. "Take it slow," Kira said in English. "You've been frozen for a long time. Your body needs to readjust." Jake's voice came out as a hoarse whisper. "Where am I? What happened to the base?" Before Kira could answer, the alien commander stepped forward. Jake's training kicked in immediately, even weakened. He recognized a potential threat. His eyes quickly scanned the creature. Bipedal, 7 feet tall, natural armor plating, and intelligence gleaming in those yellow eyes. "Greetings, ancient." "Human," Veltar said in accented English. "I am Commander Veltar of the Hegemony forces. You have awakened to a very different galaxy than the one you left." Jake slowly pushed himself up to sitting position, his mind racing. The alien's English was perfect, which meant they had been studying humans for some time. The woman appeared human, but wore clothes he didn't recognize. The technology in the room was far beyond anything from his time. "How long?" Jake asked simply. 300 years, Kira answered softly. "The war you were fighting, humanity, lost." Jake absorbed this information without visible reaction, though inside his military mind was already adapting to the new reality. He had trained for worst-case scenarios his entire career. This was simply the worst case he had never imagined. "Your species put up an amusing fight," Veltar continued, clearly enjoying himself. "But chemical weapons and metal projectiles were no match for quantum disruptors and orbital bombardment. Earth surrendered within 6 months of our arrival. And now?" Jake asked, his voice growing stronger. "Now humans serve the galaxy in more useful roles," the commander explained. "Mining, construction, maintenance work. Your people's endurance and adaptability make you excellent laborers." Jake said nothing, but his eyes never stopped moving. He cataloged every detail of the room, the alien's equipment, the woman's nervous behavior. 3 centuries of technological advancement, complete military defeat, and humanity reduced to slavery. It was information that would break most people, but Jake Morrison was not most people. I suppose you're wondering about your fate, Veltar continued. The Supreme Admiral finds historical specimens fascinating. You'll be studied, questioned about your primitive tactics, perhaps displayed in our war museums. I see, Jake said, calmly swinging his legs over the side of the chamber. Dr. Stone, is it? Could I have some water? Kira nodded quickly and handed him a container. As Jake drank, she caught something in his eyes that surprised her. There was no despair, no broken spirit that she expected from someone learning their entire world was gone. Instead, there was a calculating intelligence that seemed to be processing everything with cold efficiency. You're taking this rather well, for a primitive, Veltar observed suspiciously. Jake finished the water and looked directly at the alien commander. In my experience, falling apart doesn't change the situation. It's better to understand what you're dealing with. And what do? You think you're dealing with? Veltar asked, amused. An occupying force that's gotten comfortable, Jake replied quietly. Question is, what have you learned about humans in 300 years? The alien laughed, a harsh sound. That you break easily when properly motivated. That you follow orders when the consequences of refusing are made clear. That you breed quickly and adapt to harsh conditions. Anything else? What else is there to know about livestock? Jake nodded thoughtfully, as if considering this. But Kira caught a glimpse of something dangerous flash across his features. It was gone so quickly she almost thought she imagined it. Colonel Morrison, she said carefully, there are things you need to understand about how the galaxy works. Now, the hegemony controls over 1,000 worlds. Humans are scattered across dozens of systems. Any thought of resistance was crushed long ago. Of course it was, Jake agreed. 300 years is a long time to break a people's spirit. Exactly, Veltar said with satisfaction. Your species learned their place in the natural order. The strong rule, the weak serve. It's quite simple. Jake stood up slowly, testing his balance. His body felt strange after the long freeze, but strength was returning. I'd like to learn more about this new galaxy. See how humanity has adapted. You'll have plenty of time to observe, Veltar said. Will be processed like any other human. Worker. Perhaps mining duty would be appropriate for someone of your background. That sounds reasonable, Jake said mildly. But as they left the chamber, Kira noticed that Jake's eyes never stopped moving. He was memorizing the layout of the facility, counting the number of guards, noting their equipment and patrol patterns. For someone who had just learned his entire civilization was destroyed, he seemed remarkably focused on gathering intelligence. Later that evening, as Jake was being processed through the standard human registration system, he was assigned to a transport heading for the mining colonies. Kira had requested to accompany him, ostensibly to continue her historical research. Dr. Jake said quietly as they waited for departure. In your studies of human history, did you ever learn about something called asymmetric warfare? Kira looked confused. I'm not familiar with that term. Jake smiled slightly, and for just a moment, she saw something that made her think this ancient marine might not be the broken relic everyone assumed he was. Don't worry about it, he said. It's probably not important anymore. But as their transport lifted off toward the mining world of Kepler-4 for 2B, Jake Morrison was already planning. The aliens had made one crucial mistake in their assessment of humanity. They had confused temporary defeat with permanent submission. And they were about to learn the difference between conquering a people and truly defeating them. The ancient warrior was awake, and the galaxy was about to remember why humans had once dreamed of reaching the stars. The mining colony on Kepler-4b was a harsh world of red rocks and thin air. Jake Morrison stepped off the transport ship with dozens of other human workers, his eyes taking in everything. The alien guards carried energy weapons that hummed. With power, floating cameras watched every movement. The message was clear. Escape was impossible. But Jake wasn't thinking about escape. He was thinking about something much more dangerous. The human barracks were crowded and loud. Men and women of all ages sat on metal bunks, talking quietly or staring at nothing. Jake found an empty bed in the corner and listened to conversations around him. Most of the talk was about work quotas, food rations, and small complaints about daily life. These people had accepted their situation. "You're the Iceman," said a voice nearby. Jake turned to see a young man with short black hair and intense green eyes. "Word travels fast around here. I'm Ben Carter. Jake Morrison." Sat down on the next bunk. 300 years frozen, huh? Must be weird seeing how things turned out. Different than I expected, Jake said carefully. Bet my great-grandfather used to tell stories about the old days when humans fought back. Ben's voice dropped to a whisper. Some of us still remember those stories. Jake studied the young man's face. There was anger there and hope and something that looked like barely controlled rage. Stories are good. They keep the past alive. The past, Ben said bitterly. What good is the past when we're mining rocks for lizard masters? Other workers had started gathering around them. Jake noticed they moved carefully, keeping their voices low. These people had learned to be afraid, but some still had fire in their eyes. This is Maria Santos, Ben said, gesturing to a middle-aged woman with gray streaks in her dark hair. Kay. And Danny White, Pete Johnson, and Lisa Kim. We're what? Passes for troublemakers around here. Maria leaned forward. Ben told us about you, a real soldier from the war. Is it true you fought the aliens when they first came? I fought somebody, Jake said simply. Long time ago. We've been trying to organize something, Danny said. He was older, maybe 50, with scars on his hands from mining work. Hit supply. Convoys, damage equipment, make them hurt a little. How's that working out? Jake asked. The group fell silent. Pete, a thin man with nervous eyes, spoke up. We lost 8 people last month. The aliens don't just punish the ones they catch. They punish everyone. Jake nodded. Collective punishment. Classic occupation strategy. Makes people afraid to support resistance. Exactly, Ben said. So what do we do? Just give up. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Around them, other workers went about their evening routines. Guards walked past the windows, their weapons ready. The mining facility hummed with alien technology designed to extract every ounce of valuable ore from the planet. Tell me about the guards, Jake said finally. Their routines, their weapons, their communication systems. For the next hour, the small group described everything they knew about the facility's security. Jake asked careful questions. Building. A picture in his mind. The aliens relied heavily on technology and followed predictable patterns. They had overwhelming firepower, but used it lazily, confident that humans wouldn't dare challenge them. What about other colonies? Jake asked. Other worlds where humans work? Dozens of them, Maria said. Maybe hundreds. We used to get news through the supply ships, but the aliens cracked down on communication between colonies. Divide and conquer, Jake said. Keep resistance groups isolated so they can't coordinate. So what's your point? Asked, frustration. Clear in his voice, that we're screwed no matter what we do. Jake looked at each face in the circle. These people were tired, angry, and desperate. But they weren't broken. Not completely. My point is that your enemy has weaknesses, Jake said quietly. They just aren't the weaknesses you've been attacking. Over the following days, Jake worked. In the mines, like any other laborer, carried rocks, operated simple machinery, and kept his mouth shut around the guards. But in the evenings, he began teaching his new friends things they had never learned. Forget about their weapons, he told them one night. You can't outgun them. But they have to eat, they have to sleep, and they have to communicate. Those are your targets. We tried hitting supply convoys, Danny protested. They just brought in more guards. Because you hit them directly, Jake explained. That's not how you hurt a supply chain. You make them paranoid. You make them waste resources. On security. You force them to second-guess every decision. He drew simple diagrams in the dirt floor of the barracks. See this mining operation? It looks simple, but it depends on dozens of systems working together. It's transport schedules, equipment maintenance, communication networks, food distribution. Break any link in that chain, and the whole system slows down. But they'll just fix whatever we break, Lisa said. Sure they will. But fixing things takes time and resources. And while they're fixing one problem, you create 3 more somewhere else. Pretty soon, they're spending more time fixing things than they are mining, or Ben's eyes lit up with understanding. You're talking about making them inefficient. Talking about making them afraid, Jake corrected. Not afraid of dying, afraid of failing. When an occupation force starts looking incompetent, their superiors ask questions. And when superiors ask questions, local commanders make mistakes. Jake began assigning simple tasks to different members of the group. Maria would monitor guard shift changes and report any pattern changes. Danny would keep track of supply deliveries and note any delays or irregularities. Pete would listen to conversations between guards and report anything unusual. This isn't resistance, Ben complained after a week of gathering information. This is just watching. This is intelligence, Jake said patiently. You can't fight. What you don't understand, right now, you don't understand your enemy nearly well enough. The breakthrough came 2 weeks later. Lisa had been assigned to clean the communication center and overheard guards complaining about problems at another mining colony. Equipment failures, transport delays, and worker accidents had cut production by 30%. That's the Titan 7 facility, Maria said when Lisa reported what she'd heard. 2 systems away from here. Jake smiled for the first time since his arrival. Someone else is learning how to make trouble. He began planning their first real operation. Not an attack on guards or a raid on supplies, but something much more subtle. Jake had noticed that the mining equipment required precise calibration to extract ore efficiently. Small changes in the settings would reduce output without triggering obvious alarms. We're going to make them think their equipment is wearing out, he explained. Not broken, just getting old and unreliable. They'll spend weeks trying to figure out what's wrong. The operation was almost anticlimactically simple. Ben and Danny made tiny adjustments to 3 different machines during their work shifts. The changes were so small that the equipment continued to function. But our output dropped by 15% over the next week. The alien supervisors were baffled. They ran diagnostics, replaced components, and brought in technical specialists. Production continued to decline as Jake's team made additional small adjustments. Within a month, the facility's output had dropped by nearly half. Commander Veltar arrived on an inspection ship, furious about the production shortfall. Jake watched from the barracks as the reptilian alien berated his subordinates in the compound's central plaza. The Supreme Admiral demands answers, Veltar hissed at the facility commander. How does a simple mining operation suddenly become unable to meet quotas? Jake turned to Ben, who was watching with barely concealed satisfaction. Now they're afraid, he said quietly. Afraid people make bigger mistakes. The next day, Veltar ordered increased security measures. More guards, longer work shifts, and random searches of worker quarters. The aliens were reacting exactly as Jake had predicted, with heavy-handed responses that made them look desperate. The other workers are starting to notice, Maria reported. They see the guards acting nervous. They hear the supervisors arguing. People are asking questions. Good, Jake said. Questions lead to thinking. And thinking leads to hope. But Jake's biggest victory came when Dr. Kira Stone arrived with a new transport of workers. Among the new arrivals was a woman Jake recognized immediately from her military bearing and alert eyes. Captain. Lisa Warren had been a fighter pilot during Earth's final defense. Jake had read her service record during the war, an excellent tactician and natural leader. She had been captured during a reconnaissance mission and presumed dead. Colonel Morrison, she said quietly when they met in the barracks. I heard rumors you were alive, but I didn't believe them. Jake smiled grimly. Captain Warren, good to see you're still breathing. Lisa looked around at the mining facility with professional interest. Heard you've been causing some trouble here? The guards on the transport were complaining about production. Problems at multiple colonies. Multiple colonies? Jake raised an eyebrow. Oh yes, Lisa said with satisfaction. Word spreads fast among human workers. Funny how equipment starts malfunctioning once people learn it's possible to fight back without getting shot. Jake felt something he hadn't experienced in months: genuine hope. The fire he had lit on this small mining world was spreading to others. Captain Lisa Warren spread a crude map on the floor of the storage room where they held their secret meetings. The map showed 12 star systems where humans worked in mining colonies, factory worlds, and agricultural planets. Red marks indicated places where production problems had started appearing. "Spreading faster than we expected," Lisa said, keeping her voice low. "Workers on 6 different worlds have started using your techniques, Jake. The aliens are getting nervous." Jake studied the map carefully. Each red mark represented thousands of humans who had decided to fight back in small, quiet ways. Equipment, breakdowns, communication failures, transport delays. Nothing dramatic enough to trigger mass punishment, but enough to make the hegemony's administrators look incompetent. "The key is coordination," Jake explained to the group gathered around. Him, Ben Carter, Maria Santos, Danny White, and a dozen other resistance members listened intently. Right now, each colony is operating independently. That's good for security, but it limits our impact. "How do we coordinate without communication systems?" Ben asked. "Aliens monitor everything." Lisa smiled. "That's where my flying experience comes in. I've been talking to transport pilots, humans who work on the cargo ships. They're willing to carry messages between colonies." "Hidden messages," Jake added. "Nothing that looks like military communication, trade information, family, news, work complaints, but coded to carry real intelligence." Over the next week, Jake and Lisa developed a simple code system using everyday words and phrases. Complaint about broken tools meant equipment sabotage was ready. A request for family news meant a colony needed new instructions. Comment about bad weather warned of increased alien security. The first coordinated operation targeted supply chains across 8 different worlds simultaneously. On Jake's signal, human workers began causing small delays and inefficiencies in their assigned tasks. Nothing dramatic: a broken conveyor belt here, a delayed shipment there, computer glitch that required system restarts. The cumulative effect was devastating. Cargo ships arrived late at their destinations, factories ran out of raw materials, anointing quotas fell short across multiple star systems. Most importantly, the alien administrators couldn't figure out what was going wrong, Commander. Veltar arrived at the Kepler 4 for 2B facility 3 days after the operation began. Jake watched from the mining tunnels as the reptilian alien stalked through the compound, his yellow eyes burning with frustration. "Production efficiency has dropped 30% across the sector," Veltar snarled at the local facility commander. "The Supreme Admiral is asking questions. I need answers." Jake allowed himself a small smile. When military commanders started getting pressure from their superiors, they made predictable mistakes. Sure enough, Veltar ordered harsh new punishments for any worker who failed to meet quotas. Guard patrols increased. Work shifts got longer, food rations were reduced. "He's doing exactly what I hoped he would," Jake told Lisa that evening. "Overreacting. With force instead of trying to understand the real problem." "But people are suffering because of the new restrictions," Maria pointed out. "Some of the workers are starting to blame us for making things worse." Jake nodded seriously. "That's the hardest part of resistance work. Things get worse before they get better. But look around. Are people giving up, or are they getting angry?" Lisa had been watching the other workers during the evening meal. "They're getting angry," she confirmed. "The new guards are being rougher. The supervisors are more demanding. People who never complained before are starting to ask why they have to live like this." "Good," Jake said. "This anger is useful if you know how to direct it." The next phase of Jake's plan was more dangerous. Instead of just causing delays and inefficiencies, he wanted to turn the aliens' own technology against them. The mining facilities, computer systems controlled everything from life support to communication networks. Jake had been studying these systems during his work shifts, learning how they functioned. "The aliens are smart," he explained to Ben and Danny. "But their computers are predictable. They follow logical patterns. If you understand the logic, you can make the computers do things their programmers never intended." Jake's target was the facility's automated security system. The cameras, sensors, and alarms were all controlled by a central computer that made decisions based on programmed rules. Jake had noticed that the system could be confused by feeding it contradictory information. Operation required precise timing. While Jake created a distraction in one part of the facility, Ben and Lisa accessed computer terminals in two different locations. Didn't try to hack the system directly. Instead, they fed it false sensor readings that made the computer think there were security breaches in empty areas. The result was chaos. Alarms sounded throughout the facility as the security system detected dozens of phantom intruders. Guards rushed to investigate non-existent threats, while the real resistance members moved freely through areas that were suddenly unmonitored. "This is impossible," one alien supervisor complained loudly. "The sensors show intruders everywhere, but the guards find nothing." Jake used the confusion to access the main communication array. He planted a small device that Lisa had built from salvaged components. Nothing sophisticated. Just a simple transmitter that would broadcast random noise on the alien's primary communication frequency. Within hours, the facility's communication system was unreliable. Messages were garbled, connections dropped randomly, and important information was lost in static. The aliens brought in technical teams to find the problem, but Jake's device was too small and well hidden to locate easily. Commander Veltar was furious when he learned about the communication failures. "First production drops. Now our systems are malfunctioning. This facility is becoming a complete disaster." But Jake's masterstroke came when he realized that the aliens' greatest strength, their advanced technology, was also their greatest weakness. They had become completely dependent on their computers and automated systems. When those systems failed, aliens didn't know how to function manually. The mining equipment required computer-controlled precision to extract ore efficiently. When Jake's team introduced tiny errors into the control programs, the machines began making mistakes. Not obvious breakdowns, but subtle problems that reduced efficiency and caused random shutdowns. The aliens tried to fix the problems by updating software and replacing components. But Jake had studied their diagnostic procedures and knew how to make problems appear and disappear in ways that frustrated their repair efforts. "It's like fighting ghosts," one alien technician complained. "Every time we fix something, two new problems appear somewhere else." The psychological effect on the alien personnel was exactly what Jake had hoped for. They became paranoid, suspicious, and inefficient guards started arguing with each other. Supervisors blamed subordinates for problems they couldn't understand. The facility's chain of command began breaking down under stress. More importantly, word of the facility's problems spread to other alien installations. Jake learned from intercepted communications that similar technical difficulties were being reported across multiple star systems. Human workers on other worlds were learning to use the aliens' dependence on technology against them. Captain Lisa Warren proved invaluable in expanding their operations. Her knowledge of spacecraft systems allowed them to extend their sabotage to the transport ships that carried or between planets. Nothing dramatic, just small problems that caused delays and required expensive repairs. "The beauty of this approach," Lisa explained to the group, "is that the aliens can't tell the difference between equipment wearing out naturally and deliberate sabotage. They're spending enormous resources trying to maintain systems that were systematically undermining." The breakthrough moment came when Dr. Kira Stone approached Jake during a routine medical examination. The human scientist had been watching the facility's problems with growing interest. "Colonel Morrison," she said quietly, making sure no guards were listening, "I've been analyzing the pattern of system failures here and at other facilities. The statistical probability of so many random problems occurring simultaneously is essentially zero." Jake looked at her carefully. "What are you suggesting, Doctor?" "I'm suggesting that someone with extensive knowledge of systems analysis and military tactics is orchestrating a coordinated campaign of sabotage across multiple worlds." She paused. "I'm also suggesting that this person should know that other humans are watching and learning." Kira handed him a medical report that looked routine but contained coded information about resistance activities on 15 different worlds. The scope of the movement was far larger than Jake had imagined. "The aliens think they're dealing with random equipment failures," Kira continued, "but we know better. The question is, what comes next?" Jake studied the coded report, his mind racing with possibilities. The resistance had grown from a small group of angry miners into a galaxy-wide network of humans who had remembered how to fight. They had proven that the hegemony could be hurt, that their technology could be turned against them, and that humans were not the broken slaves their masters believed them to be. "What comes next," Jake said quietly, "is we stop hiding in the shadows." Admiral Zephyx stood in the command center of his flagship, watching reports stream in from across the galaxy. The massive alien's 6 arms moved quickly across holographic displays, each showing the same disturbing pattern. Production failures, system breakdowns, and communication problems were spreading through the hegemony like a disease. 37 worlds now reporting significant efficiency drops, his aide reported. Engineering teams can find no common cause for the failures. Mandibles clicked with anger. The hegemony had ruled the galaxy for over 3 centuries without serious challenge. Now, somehow, their most docile slaves were causing problems that threatened the entire empire. "Send Commander Veltar to my private chamber," Zephyx ordered. Now, when Veltar arrived, his usually confident demeanor had been replaced by obvious nervousness. The reptilian commander had seen his career prospects dim considerably as problems mounted in his sector. "Admiral, I have been investigating the human called Morrison," Veltar began. "Its background suggests capabilities we may have underestimated." "Explain." "He was not merely a ground soldier. His records indicate extensive training in strategic planning, psychological operations, and what humans call asymmetric warfare. He was specifically trained to fight enemies with superior technology." Admiral Zephyx studied the data Veltar provided. Jake Morrison's military record showed a pattern of successful operations against overwhelming odds. He had won battles by making enemies defeat themselves, by turning their strengths into weaknesses. "You believe this ancient human is behind our current problems?" "I believe he is teaching others what he knows," Veltar replied carefully. "Patterns match his documented tactical preferences perfectly." Zephyx made his decision with characteristic swiftness. "Assemble the Third Fleet." "I want every available warship prepared for immediate deployment, sir." "Where are we deploying?" "To the Sol System," Zephyx said grimly. "If this human wants to play strategic games, we'll give him a lesson in overwhelming force. We're going to end this rebellion by destroying its birthplace." Word of the massive fleet movement spread quickly through the galaxy's communication networks. Dr. Kira Stone received the information through her contacts in the hegemony science division and immediately sent coded warnings to resistance cells across known space. Jake Morrison received the message while working in the deep mining tunnels of Kepler 4 for to be. The simple phrase, "storm approaching home," told him everything he needed to know. The aliens were finally taking the threat seriously enough to respond with military force. "They're bringing a fleet to Earth," he told Lisa Warren and Ben Carter during their evening meeting. "Probably planning to make an example by destroying what's left of humanity's homeworld?" Ben's face went pale. "How big a fleet?" "Big enough to crack planets," Lisa said grimly. She'd been monitoring alien military communications and knew the Third Fleet's reputation. "Over 200 warships, including planet-killer weapons." The resistance members looked at Jake expectantly, waiting for him to provide another clever solution. But Jake knew that this time, cleverness wouldn't be enough. The aliens had decided to solve their problem with brute force, and brute force required a different kind of response. "Can't stop that fleet," Jake said simply. "But we don't need to stop it. We need to use it." Over the next several days, Jake began implementing the most dangerous plan of his military career. Using the Resistance Network's communication system, he sent messages to human workers across the galaxy. The messages weren't tactical instructions or sabotage plans, were something much more powerful. "People of Earth and children of humanity." The message began. 300 years ago, our world fell to alien conquerors. We were told we were defeated, broken, and would never rise again. But today I speak to you as proof that the human spirit cannot be destroyed. The message spread from world to world, translated into dozens of languages, but carrying the same essential truth. Humanity had not been conquered, only temporarily subdued. And now, it was time to remember who they really were. The aliens are bringing a massive fleet to destroy Earth, Jake's message continued. They think this will break our resistance. Instead, it will be the moment we show the galaxy what humans are truly capable of. Jake's plan was audacious in its simplicity. He couldn't gather enough ships to fight the alien fleet directly, but he could gather enough humans to make a statement that would echo across the galaxy forever, using salvaged communication equipment and the transport pilot network. Jake coordinated with resistance cells on every world where humans lived. The plan wasn't to defeat the alien fleet. It was to ensure that when the fleet arrived at Earth, they would find something they had never encountered before. Admiral Zefix's third fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. 2 weeks later, the massive armada of alien warships moved toward Earth in perfect formation, their weapons charged and ready to demonstrate the price of rebellion. But as they approached humanity's ancient homeworld, Zefix began receiving reports that confused and alarmed him. "Admiral, we're detecting ship movements throughout the system," his sensor operator reported. "Hundreds of small vessels converging on Earth's orbital space." "Resistance fighters?" Zefix asked. "Negative, sir." "B. Unarmed transport ships, mining vessels, and cargo haulers. They're not taking defensive positions, they're just gathering." Zefix watched the tactical display with growing unease. The approaching ships were clearly human-operated, but they showed no signs of preparing for battle. Instead, they seemed to be positioning themselves between his fleet and Earth, as if creating some kind of barrier. Then the communications started. "This is Captain Lisa Warren of the Human Liberation Fleet," came a voice over the open channels. "We speak for all humans everywhere who remember what freedom means." This is Ben Carter, representing the workers of Kepler-4 for it to be. "We stand with Earth." Maria Santos, speaking for the miners of Alpha Centauri. "We are not afraid." One by one, hundreds of voices filled the communication channels. Humans from dozens of worlds speaking their names and their refusal to surrender. The transport ships and mining vessels continued to arrive, forming a growing cloud of humanity around Earth. Admiral Zefix realized what he was witnessing with a mixture of shock and grudging respect. The humans weren't trying to fight his fleet. They were choosing to die with their homeworld rather than live as slaves. Admiral Commander Veltar's voice came over the private channel. "The humans are broadcasting these communications across the entire galaxy. Every world where humans work is hearing this." Zefix understood the trap immediately. If he destroyed this collection of unarmed ships and their crews, he would be creating martyrs. The story would spread to every human in the galaxy that their people had chosen death over submission, that they had faced impossible odds without backing down. But if he didn't destroy them, he would appear weak. The hegemony's authority depended on the belief that resistance was futile. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we're receiving communications from other sectors. Human workers are staging work stoppages across 43 worlds. They're demanding to know what's happening at Earth." On the mining world of Kepler-4 to B, Jake Morrison stood in the facility's main communication center, surrounded by every human worker on the planet. The alien guards had been overwhelmed and disarmed without violence. The humans simply outnumbered them 10-1. "This is Colonel Jake Morrison." He spoke into the transmitter, knowing his words were being broadcast. "To Admiral Zefix's fleet. 300 years ago, I was frozen during humanity's last stand. Today I watch humanity make its greatest stand." Jake's voice carried across space to reach every ship in both fleets. "Admiral Zefix, you came here to break human resistance with overwhelming force, but you've made one crucial mistake. You've reminded us who we are." The communication channels filled with human voices from across the galaxy. Workers on mining worlds, servants on alien pleasure planets, technicians on space stations, all speaking their names, their defiance, and their refusal to accept slavery. "We are the children of explorers who dreamed of touching the stars," Jake continued. "We are the descendants of warriors who chose death over dishonor. You conquered our world, but you could never conquer our spirit." Admiral Zefix watched his tactical displays with growing alarm. The work stoppages were spreading. On world after world, humans were laying down their tools and walking away from their assigned tasks. Production was grinding to a halt across the hegemony. Admiral, his communications officer reported. We're receiving surrender requests from facility commanders on 17 worlds. They're requesting immediate military support to restore order. Zephyx faced an impossible choice. He could destroy the human ships at Earth and create martyrs that would inspire rebellion for generations, or he could show mercy and appear weak to his own people. Sir, Commander Veltar said quietly, perhaps there is a third option. Zephyx looked at his subordinate with interest. The humans have proven they cannot be ruled through fear alone, Veltar continued. Perhaps it's time to consider whether they should be ruled at all. In the space around Earth, hundreds of human ships maintain their positions, their crews waiting to see whether they would live or die. Admiral Zephyx stared at the tactical display for a long moment, watching the hundreds of human ships arranged around Earth like a protective shield. His massive fleet had the firepower to destroy every vessel in minutes, but the cost would be far greater than the immediate military victory. Admiral, his communications officer reported, we're receiving more reports from across the galaxy. Work stoppages have now spread to 78 worlds. Facility commanders are requesting immediate assistance. Zephyx's mandibles clicked nervously. The hegemony controlled over 1,000 worlds, but their economy depended heavily on human labor. If the work stoppages continued, the Empire would face serious shortages of essential materials within weeks. Sir, Commander Veltar approached carefully. I've been analyzing the situation. Humans have created what their military texts call a strategic dilemma. Any action we take now will have consequences that work against our long-term interests. Explain. If we destroy these ships, we create martyrs that will inspire resistance for generations. If we retreat without action, we appear weak to other subject species who might consider their own rebellions. But there is a third option. Admiral. Zephyx listened as Veltar outlined a proposal that would have seemed impossible just weeks earlier. The alien commander had been studying human military strategy and had reached a surprising conclusion about the nature of true victory. Meanwhile, Jake Morrison stood in the communications center on Kepler-4 for Tubi, coordinating with resistance leaders across the galaxy. The response to his call had exceeded his wildest expectations. Humans on distant worlds were not just laying down their tools, they were actively taking control of their facilities. Colonel Dr. Kira Stone reported from her position at another. Consul, I'm receiving reports from the science stations. Human technicians have gained access to several research facilities. They're demanding to be included in all future decisions about their working conditions. What about the agricultural worlds? Jake asked. Ben Carter, who had been monitoring communications from farm planets, grinned widely. Have taken over food distribution systems. They're saying they'll only produce crops if they're treated as partners, not slaves. Jake nodded with satisfaction. The galaxy-wide work stoppage was becoming something much more significant, a complete restructuring of the relationship between humans and their alien overseers. Captain, Lisa Warren approached with a communication device in her hand. Jake, we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Zephyx's flagship. He wants to speak with you directly. Jake took the device, knowing that this conversation would determine the future of humanity throughout the galaxy. This is Colonel Morrison. Colonel, Admiral Zephyx's translated voice came through clearly. You have created an impressive demonstration, but demonstrations must eventually end. What are your terms? My terms are simple, Admiral. Humanity will no longer serve as slave labor for the hegemony. We demand recognition as equal partners in galactic civilization. There was a long pause before Zephyx responded. You speak of equality, but you are still a defeated species. Your homeworld remains under our control, your people scattered across our territory. You're right about one thing, Jake replied. We're scattered across your territory. On mining worlds, factory planets, agricultural systems, research stations. Tell me, Admiral, what happens to your empire if humans simply stop working? Truth of Jake's words hung in the space between the two fleets. The hegemony had become dependent on human labor without realizing it. 3 centuries of using humans for their adaptability and endurance had made them indispensable to the alien economy. You are proposing to hold the galaxy hostage, Zephyx said finally. I'm proposing to make the galaxy work better for everyone, Jake corrected. Humans produce more when they work for themselves instead of being forced to work for others. Own efficiency reports prove it. Dr. Kira Stone had been analyzing hegemony economic data for months and knew Jake was right. Worlds where humans were treated better showed consistently higher production rates than those where they were harshly controlled. Admiral Zefix consulted with his staff for several hours while the two fleets maintained their positions around Earth. Reports continued to stream in from across the galaxy, showing the scope of the human uprising. It was becoming clear that military force alone could not resolve the situation. Colonel Morrison, Zefix, finally transmitted, "I am prepared to discuss terms for a peaceful resolution to this situation." The negotiations took place over several days, with representatives from both sides meeting aboard a neutral space station. In Earth's orbit, Jake was surprised when Commander Veltar served as the primary negotiator for the hegemony side. "You've taught me something important," Veltar told Jake during a private moment between sessions. "True strength comes not from the ability to destroy your enemies, but from the wisdom to turn them into allies." The final agreement established what became known as the Human Autonomy Accords. Humans would be granted self-governance on designated worlds with the right to establish their own governments and make their own laws. In exchange, they would continue to provide essential services to the hegemony, but as paid partners rather than slaves. More importantly, the Accords established principles that would eventually extend to other species within the hegemony. Empire began its slow transformation from a military dictatorship into a more cooperative federation of worlds. Jake Morrison found himself appointed as the first human ambassador to the Hegemony Council, a position he accepted reluctantly. He had never wanted to be a politician, but he understood that peace required as much skill as war. 6 months after the standoff at Earth, Jake stood on the observation deck of the rebuilt lunar colonies, watching human ships prepare for departure to distant stars. These weren't cargo vessels or mining ships, but exploration craft built by humans for human purposes. Captain Lisa Warren joined him at the viewing window. She now commanded the first human deep space exploration vessel in 3 centuries, preparing to search for new worlds where humans could build their own colonies. "Hard to believe how much has changed," she said, watching the ship preparations below. "The galaxy was ready for change," Jake replied. "We just reminded everyone that it was possible." Ben Carter approached, carrying a tablet with reports from across human space. The young man who had once been an angry miner was now coordinating construction projects on a dozen worlds where humans were building their own cities. "Production reports are in," Ben announced cheerfully, "and Canaan facilities are exceeding previous quotas by an average of 40%. Turns out people work harder when they're working for themselves."
Dr. Kira Stone
had been appointed to head the new Human Science Institute, where human and alien researchers worked together on projects that benefited all species. Her latest report showed breakthrough developments in medical technology and sustainable energy systems. "The other species are watching what we've accomplished," she told Jake. "Several of them have approached me about establishing similar autonomy agreements with the hegemony." Jake smiled at that news. The revolution that had started with equipment sabotage in the mining tunnels was spreading beyond humanity to transform the entire galaxy. Commander Veltar, now serving as liaison between the hegemony and human governments, had become an unexpected friend. The reptilian alien often visited Earth to study human military history and had developed a deep appreciation for their strategic thinking. "Your species has a saying," Veltar said during one of their conversations. "The pen is mightier than the sword. I never understood it until I met you." "Actually," Jake corrected with a grin, "I prefer a different saying. The best victory is one where your enemy becomes your ally." As Jake watched the exploration ships launch toward distant stars, he reflected on the strange path that had brought him to this moment. He had awakened from frozen sleep expecting to find his species destroyed, only to discover that they had been transformed instead. The ancient warrior had become a builder of peace, proving that even the most hopeless situations could be changed by people willing to fight for something better. Humanity had not just won its freedom, it had shown the galaxy it's a new way to live. The relic from Earth's past had become the architect of the galaxy's future. and the stars themselves seem brighter. For the change?